So, Catherine, what is your full name?
Catherin Alvarez.
And can you tell me why Albert Morales and the mayor's office selected you to be on the cover page of Local Community Heroes?
I have no idea, to be honest. I know I received a life-saving award for saving somebody's life, but there's a lot of officers that do a lot of great things.
So tell me about this life-saving award.
So it's the PAL Life-Saving Award whenever you do something to save somebody's life. Like in my case, I performed CPR on a gentleman who was visiting at Cesar Chavez Park, and it ended up like saving his life because now he's alive and well. So
Is he a local person?
he's not local. I believe he was from Washington. He was a visiting pastor for a wedding here, and he was, I believe, staying at one of the hotels downtown by Cesar Chavez Park.
And you happened to be there, or?
Yes, I was working downtown. I was on patrol and bikes with Officer Mank, and we usually patrol around downtown and everything. And we heard the call come out, and we went over to the park, and I saw him laying there, and people were kind of frantic, and I looked down, I could see him slowly turning purple. So, and there were so many people there, and they just said, do something, do something. So, and my buddy was like, I'll get on the radio, because you start to forget about, everybody's trained in CPR, and you have updates and stuff, but I think sometimes you forget the importance of keeping that updated, and I just jumped in and started giving him CPR, remembering. Luckily, we had our CPT training, and the updated, and just giving him compressions, and I could see the slowly, the blood like circulating. It was actually pretty amazing to see that a human person can do that for another one.
But isn't that amazing thing you just said earlier? There were so many people were around, and they were saying, do something, do something. And I'm sure so many people knew the CPR.
Yeah, I think that, and I just heard story after my award, I would hear stories of people doing the same thing. Some kid at a high school doing the same thing for another kid, I think went into cardiac arrest. And this is a 17-year-old, I say kid, right, 17-year-old young man, and who was young and obviously had the present mind to give another, fellow classmate CPR. And all these stories all the time, average people who aren't paramedics or doctors or anything like that, giving CPR, jumping in, and knowing CPR, and then having the present mind to be able to do it. It's an amazing thing.
So it's not necessarily what you know, but what you know, you need to know when to use it.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Having the present ability. What's that one saying of keeping your head while those about you are losing theirs? That basically shows you kind of humanity in itself, to be able to see somebody who's suffering or in need, and then jumping in, not thinking of yourself, not thinking of, people always worry about transmitted diseases and all that stuff, but you just don't think about that when you see somebody's life in the brink, and that you could actually help sustain that life and make them come back. I mean, that's
amazing.
It is amazing.
What do you think is the role of the leader in the community?
In the community, a role of leader? I think people, it's just the basicness of accountability. I think as a community, you see things and you want to point out, this is their fault, or this is that fault, or why don't they do this, or why don't, and then nobody really kind of looks and sees what I do, what can I do to make the difference of doing that? Why didn't somebody do something? People always say, you hear that on the news all the time, why didn't they do this, or why didn't they do that? And I think if people just had more accountability, myself included, I always check myself to say, whose fault is it? Is it really somebody else's fault, or maybe, is it mine, myself? Like even with my kids, I could get upset about things that they do, but am I being consistent with them? Am I being accountable to myself? Am I consistent with them, or am I being lax because they're so cute that you give in all the time, So I think everybody, if they just had accountability, I think that would change the community and make everybody leaders. I think that would be amazing.
what do you feel that children can do to be a leader?
I think it's just the same thing, having a accountability and being brave enough to vocalize that accountability. You know, the big thing nowadays, especially we see in schools, is bullying. You know, and I know a lot of kids maybe not bully, but they see it go on and yet they don't say anything, right? And I think that's just as guilty, because it's the same thing. You see somebody suffering and yet you don't do anything. And it's that accountability of saying, I don't like bullying, but I'm letting it happen to people who maybe are even my friends, but because you're not brave enough to just say things. And I think even having that would make them a phenomenal leader, you know.
What are the traits one should have in order to be selected as the leader?
What traits would you have? I think that's it. Like I said, I think accountability. I think people always feel like leaders are those ones that never fail, right? And I find, because right now I'm a field training officer, and there's times where every call is different. Law enforcement isn't black and white. There's a lot of gray, and there's a lot of understanding that I like to have the mentality that there's not bad people, they just make bad decisions at times, right? And so when you hold them accountable and saying, I'm doing this, right, because this is my job, I think as a leader, you're gonna have to have that trait of being able to be accountable and just say, everybody has to do their part, I guess. I think that's how it all comes down to, is being basically accountable for everything. Because even if you mess up, saying, even as a leader, if I say that I mess up as a field training officer, you know what, I've been on 18 years, this is something that's new, I think they respect that, and they will say, okay, nobody's infallible, right? You're a human being, and because you show that I'm going to take accountable for my wrong actions, and you know what, that's going to help you become a better leader too. Because I think people follow that, that they follow that guide of, it's hard to follow somebody who you think is perfect. It's hard to, because you just don't believe it's real, right? And so as a leader, if you show your imperfections and show that you are accountable for those imperfections and say, you know what, yeah, nobody's perfect, but we're going to do it different. I think I did special ops for 3 years, and so what we would have was a briefing, and then we would have our operation, and then we'd have a debrief. And even if it went well, right, what could we do to make it better? And I think that's the one thing I do think I appreciate about our chief now, and that I feel like he does. He's very down to earth and very human, and that when things happen that's wrong, he'll say, like, you know what, okay, this is what happened, but how are we going to do to make it better? Or even if it's good, like, I don't want good. I want to see how we could always make it better, because it's ever changing. Like, now that we have body-worn cameras and stuff like that, I think people, even as a leader, you'll always show you're not going to be perfect, and things are going to happen, and maybe people will do wrong things because, unfortunately, we're human. But I think in general, as a community as a whole, if we see somebody mess up and we see them be accountable for those mess ups, and say, you know what, this is not going to happen again, or this is what I'm doing to make sure that doesn't happen again, I think people appreciate that. I would say that would make the best leader.
So, when I ask you, why do you feel you were selected for local community unsung hero? Because, nobody talks about you as being in the police, but police is a hero, for me at least, I know that. And why do you feel that you were selected, even though when you say, I don't know?
Because I don't know. Well, we had our reward ceremony, and it was a great ceremony. And you get to hear everybody's story. You get to hear all the things that they did, the reason why and it wasn't just police officers, but it was local community members who did things that were, they were even chasing down people. I remember there's a story about a burglary, right? And these people are chasing people, and they don't have a gun, but it's, again, that it's something within them, feeling that they see something that's not right, and they themselves are trying to right what was wrong, right? And that shows, again, humanity in it. It's a great example of, no matter how horrible they say the modern world is, you see things that show humanity in itself. And I think that's a hero. I almost feel like, for me, I feel like I'm doing my job. I don't know if that's a hero. It's what I get paid to do, you know, and it's what I said I was going to do.
Well, let me ask you, how do you feel about our new president? You know, today is a 100 day.
We're not at liberty to talk about. My mom always said, never talk about religion or politics. We restrict your remarks to the weather.
Okay. What should be the role of the police in the community?
I think the role of the police in the community, the way I've been on 19 years, and obviously there's an ebb and flow of being on for so long. At first I was very like, I'm gonna arrest people and take them to jail, and then being on, I think you realize as you go more that people are just asking for your advice, asking for your help. And I would say maybe 75% of what we do is just talking to people, being their moms and dads and sisters and confidants and counselors and you know, crisis intervention people. And it's almost a minimal of that is actually taking people to jail. Most of it is figuring out what resources we can give to people to help them live a better life or help them get out of a situation that they're in at that present time.
How can police do a better job? Because they have a little stigma going on in the community. So what can police do different to resolve that, I want to say, you know, wrong visualization by the general public?
You know what, to be honest, I feel like police are just human, right? And like I said before, I think accountability is a great thing. And you see people mess up in political figures or whatever, and those who have not made excuses for their misactions and yet just were accountable, I think people would have a great respect for that. Because I think in general, even outside of the community, everybody kind of could hear somebody's story. I mean, that's all we do as police officers. We hear one side of the story, we hear another side of the story, and then you kind of get the truth in between, right? And no matter what, even if it's not a lie, it's their perception on one side and somebody else's perception, and then you hear what the truth is in the middle. I think as police officers, we're doing the best that we can. Because to be honest, I feel, I'm appreciative of this, but in general, I feel like most media sensationalizes the bad, right? With anybody, with anything. And instead of doing, just saying what it is, right? I think that's the problem too. I would hope as a community as a whole, you get tired of just hearing so much negative. I mean, it's not even about police officers, it's about everybody, politics and just the things that people do in general. It seems like unless it's bad, nobody wants to report about it.
Nobody wants to hear about it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I think in general, I'm not quite sure exactly why that is. If you look at reality television and even shows on TV that do phenomenally well, it's all negative. And I guess for me, I've started, especially in this job, there's things that you see that you can't unsee or you can't undo. And there's things that we see and we do every day that calls that we go to that question our faith, that question our abilities as a human being of what we can take, especially after 19 years. The weird thing about receiving that award at the awards banquet is the day before that awards banquet, I actually had to do CPR on a baby, and the baby did not make it. So I feel like, I kind of felt like even with this story and all this stuff, it doesn't, it's very humbling because I feel like I'm not a hero. I mean, if there's one, not saying that his life was not important, but if there was one life that you would want to save, it was one of a child and a baby, and I didn't do that. So I don't really feel like a hero, to be honest. I would just hope that people, the community would realize that as police officers, we are trying the best that we can. And I hope as police officers, maybe we could be more vocal. And like I said about kids being brave, about saying, like, listen, I'm not perfect, I'm not human, and I'm trying my best to do the best job that I can. And because I don't expect people to understand the things that we go through and the things that we see. Even as my kids, there's some things that I won't talk about to my family or whatever. And it took a while, and I think, like especially with this CPR on the baby, I think that broke me a little bit. So I appreciate your story, and I appreciate being called a hero. But I think in general, police officers, they don't feel like they're heroes.